This is Dear Strategy, episode 127. Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators, to another great episode. This is episode 127. And today I'm going to give you a strategy story. It may be more of a strategy rant. I think that's what those stories have been turning into. I'm not completely sure. But in any event, one of the things I want to say before I go into this particular story, this particular case, or whatever we want to call it, is actually a couple things. First of all, this is the last episode of 2020. So we went through this whole year kind of going through and alternating strategy stories and strategy questions, kind of see how that all worked. And I think it worked pretty good. We got good feedback, and it seems like it's a pretty nice format to go forward with. But as with most good strategies, I want to revisit it again into 2021. And one of the reasons I want to revisit it is because I really think that the question format is now starting to, get to the point where we've asked, hundreds of questions, or at least 100 questions on strategy. And, I think they're going to start to get very repetitive. They're already starting to get a little repetitive. So although that could be okay, I guess new listeners and everything else, I also don't want to be too repetitive to old episodes. So I think that format may end up kind of going by the wayside. The stories I think are good, but frankly, I don't know that, again, there's too many of those that are going to be brand new and everything else. So I think what I'm going to do for 2021 is kind of reboot completely and say, what is it that we really want to be and what is it that we really want to do? I still want to be in the format of answering strategy questions and talking about how to deliver strategies and how to develop strategies and all those kinds of things. But I think there's some cool new ways that we could do that. So stay tuned for that in the new year. Those of you who are regular listeners, I'm sure you'll be excited about that. I'm putting all that together now, and we'll see how that all kind of comes out in the new year. With that said, I do want to close this year with a story and maybe some advice wrapped into the story. And the advice is going to be for colleges. So the subject I want to talk about today is really around the value proposition of colleges. So let's talk about, first of all, value proposition. When we talk about a value proposition, and we've talked about this many times on this show, value proposition is the value that a product or service is bringing to its customers. And that value can be, put into many different terms. You could have kind of quantifiable value, where you might have things like labor savings or cost savings, you buying a product or service that's actually saving you some amount of money or time or something that you can quantify. And then you also have kind of qualitative value propositions where, the value is really more in the form of making you feel good or, kind of touching on your emotions in a way. And a lot of consumer products, this is why we buy things, right? Is because it makes us feel good. It doesn't save us money. It doesn't save us time and necessarily, but it really is something that just makes us feel good about ourselves, feel happy, whatever it is. So all of those are forms of value propositions in all different types of formats. And whenever you're shelling out money of some type, right, you're doing that because you're getting value on the other end. And what I really want to talk about is this idea of colleges and how that's evolved, right? I have a son who is now in his second year of college. And of course, with COVID-19 and the restrictions and so forth, he's not been able to actually go to college. He's been doing all of it remotely. There's actually pros and cons to that. When I was in college, a big part of the college experience was not only the education, but also kind of learning how to live on your own, right? Kind of getting into this new social environment and getting out of your house and all of those kinds of things. And you end up doing a lot of growing up there. So I guess if you're looking at a value proposition, you'd say it's twofold, right? It's the education part, and then it's the social part and the kind of growing up part. But here's where I have my issue, and I haven't gone through this, and of course, knowing many people who have gone through this, I think over the years, college really kind of evolved into, a big social experiment, right? Like it's just this big party. And in many cases, the education kind of took second place to some of the social aspects. And if we're being honest, that does really happen, especially when you're going away to college, right? You have 18-year-old kids essentially who have had authority figures their entire life that have rules of their house and things like that. And now they get thrown into, a new environment where there's none of that. And they're being asked to manage all of that. Oh, and by the way, you need to go to class and learn. It's like, really? That's not on my priority list as I'm now experimenting with all of these newfound freedoms that I have, right? And so the truth of the matter is, if we're all being honest with one another, college really kind of evolved away from the education aspect and more towards the social and party and that kind of aspect. Now, I'm not going to say that universally in all cases, that's exactly what's happened everywhere, but it certainly has happened in a lot of places, right? And I think, now that we are in a different environment where COVID-19 has happened and a lot of kids are now home from college and they're learning online and they're kind of forced now to actually focus on the education part, we're really, as parents, able to now look and reevaluate the actual education that they're getting, the actual knowledge transfer that they're getting. And I have to tell you, it's not impressive in all cases. And I'm not just talking about my one case. I can say that about when I went to college. I can say that about, my friends who went to college, people I've hired who went to college. They don't come out knowing what I think they should come out knowing. And I think, again, it's because the education has kind of degraded and the social aspect has taken over. And that's something that really needs to be revisited. So then you say, okay, so why do you go to college in the first place? Well, let's face it. The reason you'd go to college is to get the degree because most companies require the degree. And I don't know, like is that worth the money that we're spending? I mean, you spend, your life savings. You have to save, hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases, which is incredible. The cost of a 4-year education can exceed some mortgages. And when you say that's what I'm paying and the kids aren't coming out with the knowledge that I think they should be coming out with, or the education I think they should be coming out with, and, all we're really paying for is companies to be able to hire them based on knowledge that they might not even be getting, something really needs to be revisited there, right? Something really needs to be revisited there. And I think it's right time because, again, with COVID, we've been forced to reevaluate all these things. One of the benefits I can say of COVID, especially in my case, is that now that my son is not away at college, although he's not extremely happy about that fact, it's costing me roughly half of what it would have because I don't have to pay for room and board and things of that nature. And I know that he's focusing completely on his education. And again, although he's probably not extremely happy about the social aspect of that, I think there's some really good things that are coming from that. And I think, once he gets that education and can get a job based on that education, now he can go into the world and learn the social part of it, right? And I don't think that that's a bad thing. Like, you don't need to go out to college parties and get drunk every night to learn social aspects of your life. That's actually false learning, right? So I really think that this whole thing is ripe for disruption. Now, where will this all change? Well, when companies focus not on the degree, but actually on the knowledge, that's where it changes. Right now, companies require the degree. You have the degree, and then, we evaluate whether you're a good fit or not, and then we hire you. But as long as you have the degree, it's fine. But when companies start to realize the degree is not necessarily the indicator of the knowledge transfer that's occurred, because in many cases it's not, I'm sorry, having been on the other end of hiring for many, many, many years, I can't tell you the amount of people that have a degree in something and really don't have the knowledge that I would expect that they should have. And that's okay, right? I'll teach them on the job and all of those different things. But then you say, okay, but your parents spent, 6 figures on a college education for what? For a degree. So I'll hire you based on you not having knowledge. Something's wrong. Something's wrong there, right? So I really think that the disruption, so back to that, companies need to hold colleges accountable for the fact that if you have a degree in something, we expect a certain amount of knowledge. And if you don't have that certain amount of knowledge, you're not getting the job. Okay, so that's option one. Now what that forces is that if colleges want to charge these exorbitant amounts for education, then there's some test that the education is actually occurring, right? And again, I think it's up to companies to hold colleges accountable to that. Number two, which is another option, is that companies don't have to require degrees at all. In fact, what they could do is require maybe a smaller degree or maybe a 2-year degree or maybe no degree at all and say that we're going to certify you, we're going to educate you. Companies pay for the education, right? Therefore, or in that way, they know that the education transfer is happening, that the learning is actually happening. And the learning, by the way, now is really much more focused on what the company needs. That's a darn good investment for a company to make, in my opinion. So I really think that these are the things that we have to be thinking about, paying 6 figures for a college quote unquote education where the education wasn't happening and the kids were giving this false sense of what life really is like. And they're out partying and destroying their livers and whatever else they're doing. Something is really, really off about that. And I think if COVID-19 brings anything, good, and there's probably some other good things that will come from it, other disruptions and things like that. But I think if it brings anything that I think could be really positive, it's that we need to be forced to rethink the value proposition of college and really think maybe that money is better spent somewhere else that's going to give kids real education and a real head start that the colleges, quite honestly, are not providing. And we as parents and we as companies are not holding them accountable for not providing that service that we're paying a lot of money for. So, strategy, right? Strategy instead of just a year-end rant. The strategy is, if you're a college out there, you're teaching this subject, right? You're teaching strategy. If I were you, I'd be getting back to the books and I'd be really refocusing on what your strategy should be, really re-looking at all the things that we talk about on the show all the time. About, not just the academic version of strategy, but the actual version of strategy, and really think about what the trends are, what your customers want, who your competitors are, right? What your capabilities are, and take all of that into consideration and rethink your model. It's going to be painful and it's going to be tough. And it's going to be really uncomfortable. And in some cases it might not work, but I guarantee you, this is the time to think about it before the market thinks about it for you. Because I guarantee you, many of us are already doing that. So anyway, there's my year-end advice. It's not derogatory towards colleges. I hope it's helpful. Go out and rethink your strategies. You teach it, now go do it. And that's really what I would like to propose as our year-end message. So with all of that said, if you liked what you heard here, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you can give reviews, subscribe, tell your friends, share the story. All of that is stuff we'd love for you to do. And of course, go out to dearstrategy.net and you'll see all of our blogs and all of our podcasts that go back several years now, probably 3 or 4 years that we've been doing this. Also, we want to thank the sponsor of our show, Strategy Generation Company. That is the company that I founded and work for. So please go out and visit us at strategygeneration.com. You can see all the tools and the resources that we have available to help you build a strategy for your business or for your college. So if you fall into either of those categories, go check us out at strategygeneration.com, and we would be glad to help in any way that we can. So while you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.